All right, I'm extra happy right now because I get to talk to you about one of my favorite, maybe my favorite category of wine, which is sparkling red wine. This one is Lambrusco, Cantina Bassoli, Brut Rosso, 2021. We'll talk more about the specifics of this wine and Lambrusco in a second, but maybe I'm just a product of my upbringing. I'm an American. I like things with lots of bombastic qualities. I like red wine generally more than white wine. Not that I like it better, I just find it more compelling. I find that there's more there. And whatever, say what you want about that. I know like real wine heads, like their favorite grapes are usually white grapes and they love champagne and because it requires more sensitivity to grasp onto the nuances of it. And once you get to that level and you can really discern between the different excellent champagnes or the different excellent Chenin Blancs in the world, you're really getting down to the nitty gritty and you're really getting into the richness and the variability of things. And I'm just not quite that geeky, and maybe I'm just not quite that sensitive. Chenin is absolutely one of my favorite grapes, but for sparkling wine, I'd kind of always rather have a Lambrusco than a Champagne, and I don't know what that means about me. But and this is not even the kind of Lambrusco that is popular with the cool kids. It's having a resurgence. You may know about Lambrusco in your parents' or grandparents' generations. It was like a sweet, light, cheap, unserious thing, and it was very popular for exactly for those reasons. And like so many, especially wines that we're talking about these days, they come and go and they have resurgences and baggy pants or skinny pants, and things come and go in phases. And Lambrusco has had a resurgence of interest, but in general, with the cool kids, they like the lighter varieties of Lambrusco. I still like it dark. I don't want it to be sweet. I want it to be fruity. Yeah, so that's my quick blurb and my apology for being such a brute. Not a Brut Rosso, but a brute. Let's talk about the labeling real fast. All right, what do we see here? Cantina Bassoli. Cantina means, wine cellar or whatever, winemaker. Bassoli is the name of the company. A nice young dude who makes this wine. All Lambrusco comes from this area of sort of central northern Italy, around the town of Modena. Let's go back to geography in a second. What else do I see on here? Brut Rosso. So brut basically is a French term that they're borrowing. It just means that it's basically dry. You could call something extra brut, which would be very dry, almost no residual sugar. Brut on its own means, I believe, that there has to be less than 15 grams of residual sugar per liter left in the product. So it is dry, but there is still some fruitiness left there, which to me is like the sweet spot. What else am I seeing on here? Lambrusco Grasparosa di Castavetro, it says there. So Lambrusco Grasparosa is the variety of Lambrusco grape. Lambrusco is both the place and the type of wine and the grape. Sorry, it's not a place. Lambrusco is the type of wine that you make from the grapes, and it's also the name of the grapes that go into the wine. There are 6 different main varieties of Lambrusco grapes that are used for Lambrusco. This is the most common one and the most widely known one, Lambrusco Gasparosa, but there's also Lambrusco di Sorbara and Salamino, and then 3 others that I never remember them. They're called Lambrusco Maestri, Marani, and Monterico. This one is the one that's known for being super dark, the Grasparosa. Sorbara would be sort of more in the pink zone, and the Salamino tends to be even the lightest and the most ethereal and the most kind of champagne style. Now, the cool kids really like the Salamino and the Sorbara because they're more delicate, they're more ethereal, they may remind them more of a champagne type product. And that's great. And I've had some amazing, life-changing versions of those wines. But at that point, I'm like, well, maybe I would just rather have a champagne or a beer or a cider or something. If I'm, in my mind, if I'm gearing up to have a Lambrusco, I kind of want it to be dark and sexy like this. Just a quick note on the area that this is made in. If you've never been to this part of Italy, Modena and Bologna are two kind of large cities, medium-sized cities next to each other. Uh, every part of this part of Italy is the city name is a food that we're that's famous. Parmesan cheese. Modena, we have the balsamic vinegar, Modena, that's from there. Bologna. Um, Lambrusco di Castelvetro. I think this is even from, yeah. Lambrusco Gasparosto di Castelvetro. Castelvetrano olives. So much of the famous Italian produce that we know comes from this little, very lush part of Italy. I'm not a geography expert. Let me stop making a fool of myself and talk about the wine. Look how dark that is. It smells complex. It smells very earthy. Like, almost like a little dirty, which I love. And there's fruit, but a very dark, very ripe blackberry fruit leather almost smell to it. And see, it's not that fizzy. I opened this yesterday because I'm actually selling this wine. This is the second wine school review that I've done on a wine that I have a stake in. Yes, I'm a wine slanger, and this is one of the wines that I have for sale for bars and restaurants. So I opened this yesterday to show to a client. They thought it was too intense and too powerful for what they were trying to sell. Fine. So it's even less sparkling than it was yesterday, but this is not these are not supposed to be fully sparkling wines. They're calling this one a spumante. I think a lot of them are actually frizzante, which is like pretty much fully sparkling, but not all the way. And we could talk about technical details later. So yeah, it smells fruity, kind of dirty, there's almost like a body odor kind of thing, which I think is great in red wine. Sue me. Let's taste it. Yeah, I mean, there is like a real non-fruit kind of earth, God, I get the word funky. What the fuck does funky mean? But it tastes kind of funky. It's kind of like sweaty, like edgy. There's not a lot of fruit here. The textural element is the main thing. These fast, very, very minuscule and fast dissipating bubbles, and then quite an assertive tannins. If you don't know by now what I mean by tannins, it's that sandpaper, scratchy cat's tongue, astringent thing where it sucks the moisture out of your tongue. I fucking love that in a red wine, and this has lots of that. There's moderate, medium acidity here, which really saves it. Because all that tannin without acidity would be overwhelming and unpleasant. But this is well balanced. I almost want a little bit more fruit, and I think this producer makes lots of different types of Lambrusco, and some of them are more fruity, and some of them are even less. Some are lighter, some are darker. This is the one that's kind of like down the middle. So yeah, mostly a textural thing going on here. Great, like almost like a Pop Rocks almost experience of drinking this wine. Very ripe, but also quite dry. Goes down easy, not heavy. It feels like light alcohol, which is the great thing about Lambrusco in general. 11% alcohol, that's perfect. You can drink a couple glasses and not be too tipsy. And one cool thing about this too is that this is made using not certified organic, but practicing organic grapes. They actually this producer makes a certified organic version of Lambrusco that's more expensive. So they have a piece of land where they source all organic grapes. This has some of that, and this has some grapes from the surrounding areas that they're not certified because they haven't gone through the rigmarole and spent the money to get them tested, but they tell us, and we believe them, that this is made with practicing organic grapes, which is really cool and kind of rare for a wine that has historically been like mass produced and sort of like neglected and made in a way that's just do it as cheaply as possible. There's a whole conversation here too about what I've talked about before, this idea of typicity and tradition, where on the one hand, I think it's great when people break tradition and do things that are atypical. But at the same time, my heart gets set. If I know I'm opening a Lambrusco, I kind of want it to. I want it to hit certain notes. So everybody's different, and from less recognizable wine types, I think I'm more open minded. But they do this so well that I kind of want them to do this. Now this is made in the Charmat tank method. So you ferment the grapes once, mostly to dryness, in whatever vessel you're doing, usually open vats, and then you put them in a tank, a pressurized stainless steel tank that's temperature controlled and pressurized to ferment again. And that's where the bubbles come from, and that's where it basically gets held as it's fermenting. And because it's a sealed stainless steel tank, you preserve all the fruitiness in the wine while it's undergoing that second fermentation and getting fizzy. So not the most natty way of making a sparkling wine, but it's it's a happy medium. You still get this sort of traditional expected darkness and fruitiness, because there's without just like injecting it with CO2, which some people would do. Or sometimes they would do a single fermentation in a big tank and don't let it ferment to dryness, and it'll be quite sweet, and then they just make it bubbly. And that's kind of bullshit. There are some very serious Lambrusco producers, and maybe I'll get one of those soon, that are making this in a more champagne style or traditional method, where they're doing either a second fermentation in the bottle and disgorging or not disgorging, or just doing one single long fermentation in the bottle, which is kind of a sketchy thing to do because you can have problems with it exploding or not finishing its fermentation. But yeah, there's all different things happening in Lambrusco now, and it's kind of exciting. But the problem is people are trained to not pay a lot of money for this, and so people that are making small batch, interesting, labor of love Lambrusco and trying to move the needle are finding it hard to sell their product for more than $12, $13, $14 a bottle, because that's all people are willing to pay. So go out there and buy sparkling red wine and think of it anew. Give it some love, give it some attention, and consider paying what you would for another kind of wine, for a sparkling red, because they deserve to be fancy too. Bye.